Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of No Limits. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Mad Mouth. Welcome, and we have another great broadcast lined up here, and I am glad to be joined by Stuart Hack, and we're going to be talking taxes in a pandemic world. But before we do that, Stuart, why don't you give a little bit of background to our audience?
Sure thing, Scott. I am the president, the managing member of Hack Tax and Accounting Service, a tax and accounting firm in Wellington, Florida. It has been around for 7.5 years. Prior to that, I had over 25 years of experience working for different firms, medium, small, and large. And, primarily what we do all sorts of taxes, individuals, trusts, corporations, partnerships, not-for-profits, payroll, you name it, we do it. And also we do accounting services, bookkeeping, write-ups, things like that. So that's me in a nutshell. And other than sports, I do love to talk about taxes.
All right, well, let me ask you a question, Stu, okay? I know you're based in Wellington, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So do you do accounting for people around the country as well, or are you pretty much relegated to the local area?
No, I'm all over, and the way actually, when I started, it's kind of a scary thing. I had no clients, so I had to get out there and do a lot of networking and just try and meet as many people as I could. And because I'm originally from New York, I had some contacts there, and I had some friends there, and I was able to get some business there. And then you have clients that move to different states, so. I don't know the exact number of states that I have clients in, but it's numerous. I have in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area. I have someone in West Virginia, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, California. So pretty much all over. I can handle, pretty much any state. I'm an enrolled agent, so I am certified in every state. So if, God forbids, you get audited, I could represent you. And so, yes, and pretty much any state I can handle.
Now, we were talking earlier in pre-production that you're doing networking when the profession is traditionally isn't exciting. Why don't you elaborate on that, Stu?
So what I learned from the get-go, and I never had a network in the past. So, for years I worked for people. I was never concerned with bringing in business of any sort. So when I started, to me, networking was like when your favorite show went from Fox to NBC. That's what I thought it was. So when you go to these networking meetings, you have to do an elevator pitch, a commercial, so to speak. And if I told people exactly what I did, they'd be asleep in 15 seconds out of a 30-second elevator pitch. So I figured I had to be creative. I had to get people's attention. So what I would do in the case where I was talking in front of a group that didn't know me, I would get up, and the first thing I would say is, who here knows what a Manx cat is? M-A-N-X. Do you know what a Manx cat is, Scott?
No, I can't say I do. I more prefer tabbies and tuxedo cats, to be honest with you.
Okay, so some people know, some people don't. So a Manx cat is a cat that does not have a tail. So I guess you could say a Manx cat lacks detail. I am not a Manx cat. I pay very close attention to detail. So now I have pretty much everyone's attention. And I was able also in future commercials to kind of take current events and kind of give them a tax outlook on. So, for relate to taxes. So, as you know, I'm a big sports fan. So I've discussed the jock tax where, and obviously an athlete like LeBron James files a New York non-resident return for the games he plays every year in New York and New Jersey. And I think with his new contract with the Lakers, I had figured out the 2 games he would play there. I think his New York income for those years was $980,000 each year by playing 2 games.
Yeah, what is that called again? A jock tax?
It's a jock tax because wherever state the athlete plays in, they're working there. So when you're working in a state, you have to file a tax return there. So you have all these professional athletes that are filing in multiple states, and you notice too, like for free agency, especially in the NBA, all the players want a max contract. But if you really want to get the maximum bang for your buck, you're going to try and sign with a team in Florida, in Texas, even teams that have no state income tax, because then you don't have to pay that. New York and California are high tax states, New Jersey, as well. So you're playing, if you sign a max contract in those states, you're going to have state tax withholding. But if you're playing, you figure like playing in Miami, so 41 of your games are in Florida. Then add in the games for Orlando, add in the games that you play the Spurs, the Mavericks. Now all of a sudden, 50 games out of your 82, you're probably not paying any state tax on, and it's just the remainder that you're paying. So for someone that's looking for a max contract, they're looking, obviously for the biggest bang for their buck. Now, obviously, you can go to New York and you have Madison Avenue and you have other outside interests to make money on top of that maybe you don't have in Texas. But it is a consideration that a lot of athletes have when they're looking to sign as a free agent is what is the state income tax rate?
Wow, that's pretty impressive stuff. It really is a max contract. I've never heard of a jock tax up until now, and then finally a multiple states.
And, and it goes for performers too.
Right.
Like a stand-up comedian that might perform in different venues all over the country. If they're performing in Florida or Texas, they're not, the money that they make there, they're not paying tax on. But if they're performing, at the comic strip in New York, they're paying, state tax.
So what if a guy's on a 1099, what would you say the average percentage is that they should take out of their income just to make sure that they're covered?
What I tell people, and you get a lot of people, they don't quite understand, and I feel like I'm that parent that is trying to tell them, and the kid just doesn't listen. What I tell someone to do, especially if they're new as a 1099, in other words, they've always been an employee, and now all of a sudden they've gone out on their own. I'd say set up a separate bank account from your business account and just call it a tax account. So say you get $1,000 as a payment. Take $250, just put it in this tax account and forget about it until it's time to pay a tax bill. And then that's where you pay it out of. Because you get people that just put it in one account, they don't pay any attention to it, and then they get hit with this big tax bill and they don't have the money to pay it. Yeah. So I always tell people to put something aside, separate tax account, and only use that money to pay taxes.
Yeah, I actually did it, and it definitely helped me out. But would you say, on an average, percentage-wise, I'm not holding you to it, I'm just trying to get a general idea.
I would say, if you want, depending, it a lot depends to what tax bracket you ultimately end up in.
Right.
But you could do 20-25%. You try it for a year. If it's too much, you adjust. If it's too little, you adjust. But usually, 20-25%, you're likely pretty safe.
Yeah, and I usually actually took out 30%, figuring that if we overfigured, that was just extra money in my account. I've actually done it, and you know what? That separate tax account does work. Let me tell you, I would live and swear by that. So that's definitely interesting stuff. So Stuart, okay, this is your 32nd tax season, and you say you've seen a lot of first. Okay, why don't you go ahead and elaborate on that? I know, and then later on in the broadcast, you're going to talk about Gumby.
Well, in the past, I've had, this was, and it is because it's still going on, this is my 32nd tax season. So, I started in middle school. I've seen a lot of things happen over time. I've seen nervous breakdowns. I've seen heart attacks. I've seen shootings. I'll never say I've seen everything. And then this year, it wasn't that it was such an event, but just the way things unfolded and just the fact that it's still going on. And that's why, as you alluded to, I'm calling this the Gumby tax season because it's stretching. It's stretching out, and right now it's going at least until July. And who knows, how far after that, it can go. But, I always say every tax season, from my point of view, is usually the same up until March 15th. And then that last month, it takes on a whole different life, depending on the year. The last year, we had the new tax laws that we had to get accustomed to, so that was an adjustment. You had people who were working and their withholdings weren't sufficient to cover the tax liability. But this year, and it really was like around March 15th when everything started hitting the fan with this pandemic, that things just started changing, and obviously the April 15th deadline that every individual knows about is now July 15th. Even estimated people who pay estimated tax payments, and this is the bizarre world we were in for a couple of weeks, where when they were extending dates, they said, okay, anything April 15th is going to be July 15th, which is the first quarter estimated tax payment due as well. And that's fine. But they kept the second quarter at June 15th. So in our bizarre world, your second quarter estimated tax payment was actually due before your first. And then I guess someone realized how bizarre that was. And right now, the way they have it is the first two quarters are due July 15th. So for someone, that's half their tax liability they have to pay in 3 weeks. And then assuming everything, goes back where they don't do any more extended due dates, the third quarter would be due September 15th, like it always is. And the fourth quarter would be due next January 15th of 2021. But, a lot of things are changing. Even like not-for-profits that were due May 15th also have gotten extended to July 15th. The only dates that haven't really were the corporate returns and the partnership returns that had the March 15th due dates because, as I said, everything was normal, so to speak, up till March 15th. So those returns either went out or you had to file a timely extension. So those, in a lot of cases, have a 6-month extension till September 15th, and the hope is by then, that shouldn't get extended anymore, unless, of course, down here in Florida, we get hit with a hurricane, and then it gets extended again. And, I joke around where if they keep extending this tax season, it'll just go into next year, and they'll just make the forms that say 2019/20 and just combine them.
I know with all the craziness that's going on right now, we talked earlier about nervous breakdowns, heart attacks, depression, and suicides. I imagine that would be prevalent in any year, but when you're dealing with COVID-19, I would think that probably is probably a little bit more. We'll get on to the pandemic a little bit, but do you find that that's a bit more relevant?
Yeah, I think what happens is if you have people, especially those that have a history of depression, and now you're putting them in a situation where they can't leave their house for a few months, and maybe they don't have too many people that are close to them. Yeah, that's gonna weigh on you, and that's going to make things worse. And you just hope that they're able to get through it, get any help that they need. I know there've been sources out there for them, and it's definitely an issue. And of course, all the civil unrest that we've had, in the last few weeks hasn't helped either. And it's just, this year has really been a very challenging one for, the world, right. not just our nation, but just the world. This has just been a very challenging year. And, hopefully, I believe that as individuals, as countries, that, we'll get through it, and, we'll come back and we'll be stronger for it. I really believe that.
Go into more detail about the Gumby tax season.
Well, normally, a typical tax season for me is, I'm busy until April 15th, and then I get a chance, to rest a little bit. I'm usually busy for most of the year. I'll have tax projections, obviously estimates, and the payroll returns. But it was weird because this got stretched out. And as soon as the date got extended from April to July, I think a lot of people felt, well, we have more time, so we don't have to give our stuff in. And so now I'm getting people where I tell them, the deadline is July 15th, and they'll go, oh, I don't want to go on extension, so I'm going to get it to you. So the next 3 weeks, I'm going to get a lot of things coming in, and that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, to get that out, because although you can do another extension on July 15th, a 3-month to October 15th, that just extends the time to file. It does not extend the time to pay. So if you believe or you have a balance due and your return is not complete, you should make a payment with your extension in July, because you would be subject to a late payment penalty. And the late payment penalty is generally 0.5% a month of the balance that you owe. So now if it's $1,000 or so, and you're 2 months late, it's not a lot of money. The late filing penalty is worse. So if you miss the filing deadline as an individual, that's 5% of the balance due up to 25% a month that you're late, and then interest accrues on that. So that can get pretty sizable. Even like for businesses like an S corporation and a partnership, the penalty there, if you file late, because there's no tax on those levels, it gets carried down to the individual, the income. The penalty on a business return that's filed late is, I think it's $210, or it's over $200 a month per shareholder.
Wow.
So if there are 3 shareholders, that's over $600 a month, filing late, then there's interest on top of that. So it's very important at least to get something out. Like I'll have clients that say, I just can't afford to pay anything with an extension, but obviously we just file the extension as none to at least avoid the late filing, which is way worse than the late payment.
Okay. Let's go over the new deadlines. You already alluded to it, so I want you to elaborate a little bit more about the July 15th. Obviously, everybody's accustomed to April 15th, so go into more detail about how the July 15th has worked out for you and whether people will take it for granted. So the floor is yours on the July 15th.
So obviously, any individual, any nonprofit, and any entity or individual that had an April 15th deadline, that is now July 15th. And the challenge I had too, Scott, is my building from the middle of March was closed to visitors until about Memorial Day. So what would happen was, if some people did have stuff, if they had a drop off or pick up, I wasn't meeting with them in person, but basically they'd go to my parking lot, they'd call or text me, I'd run out, and I'd exchange. I was basically a drug dealer. I'd run out, I would kind of, either take what I needed or give them, a signed return, whatever it was. Memorial Day to the present, the building is now open to visitors, but the reception area is closed and you can't use the conference room. So again, when someone comes, and I have a couple of people coming tomorrow, they're going to call or text me from the parking lot. I'm going to bring them in, and because we're all going to wear face masks, and I'll be able to bring them into my office. But that's been a challenge too, to get people, who are normally used to sitting down with me, and now they can't. And luckily, I've been lucky in the appointments that I've had, over the last month or so. No one has given me a problem about the face mask thing. The closest I had about a week or two ago, I guess there was an older couple that kind of came into our building early in the morning. They were looking for an accountant, and the maintenance guy was there, so he let them in. And he took them to my office, and they were not wearing masks, and I wasn't even used to seeing anyone at that time. So they started asking me, do taxes? I said, yes. And they said, is this your card? Because they had gotten it from the front. I said, it is. So the guy sticks his hand out to shake it and says, hi, my name is. And I kind of recoiled, because I really haven't shaken a hand in 3 months. Right. And it wasn't something I'm used to. And he kind of gave me a look like, oh, you're one of those. And, I respect people's opinion if they feel they don't want to wear a face mask, but they need to respect mine, that I want to play it safe, and I expect anyone that comes into a room with me to also play it safe. We've had issues too. I'm very active in the Wellington Chamber of Commerce, and we've done a couple of ribbon cuttings. One, people did not wear face masks, so as a result, a lot of the ambassadors and board did not attend. Another one, they did and took a lot of precautions, so their attendance was a little bit better. And, there was more of a comfort there. And, there's debate as to how effective face masks are, but I think some of it is just peace of mind. Nothing, I think, is 100% secure, but it's just kind of good to know that people are just taking precautions on that. And we'll see how the rest of the year plays out. It's going to be, a work in process probably for the rest of this year into the beginning of next year, because the 2020 returns are going to look so different for people. People got stimulus checks. Now, those aren't taxable, but they have to be picked up on your return. They'll go in and go out. You're not going to pay tax on them, but you have to report it. And then, we can get into a little later with the businesses, all the different loans and grants that they were able to get in 2020 and how it affects them from a tax standpoint. So there's going to be a lot of things that are a lot of issues that are going to go into next year because of this. And of course, I just mentioned the stimulus check.
Right. I was going to ask
now
you that.
There's going to be a second one. There's a possibility of a second one before the end of the year.
Really? No kidding. Wow. Yeah, why don't you go into that, now that you brought it up, Stuart, why don't you go ahead into more detail about the stimulus money that's out there, in terms of how it's taxed and potentially the other one. Thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, so for individuals, the way it worked is if your income fell into a certain level. So say married couple, if your gross income was under 200,000, you were eligible for some sort of stimulus payment. You would get the full amount, and I'll get to what that is in a second, if you were under 150,000 as married filing joint, and then it kind of phases out, and then once you hit 200,000, you don't get anything. So a married couple would get $1,200 each. That's $2,400, plus any dependent under the age of 17 would get an additional $500. So a married couple with two young children would get $3,400. Now, one of the things I had to do this year, and you really had to look out for on the returns that I was completing, is if the government would look at your 2019 return to see if you were eligible, and then they'd send you the stimulus. But if you hadn't filed your 2019 return, they'd look at 2018. Now, I had clients that qualified based on 2018, but didn't based on 2019. So what I did was, even if those returns were finished, I said, we can't file these yet. Let's wait until you get your check. You have till July 15th to file the return. Once you get the check based on 2018, then we can go ahead and file 2019. And you don't have to pay it back. Even if they say, okay, 2019, you were over, that's fine. You don't have to pay it back. You get the $2,400 or the $3,400, whatever it is, you get that. So it was just a weird situation where you have returns that are completely done. Everyone's all done with them, and you're not filing them. And then you have people also that may not qualify in 2018 or 2019, but look, income is going to be way lower in 2020 for a lot of individuals. And also young adults that have graduated college and may no longer be a dependent on their parents and may be filing on their own for the first time in 2020, like my daughter, they can get, because as I said earlier, because the stimulus will be a line item on the 2020 return, it'll be like two lines. They'll say, based on your income, you're entitled to $1,200. How much did you receive? Say it's zero. Then you would get $1,200 added to your 2020 refund or deducted from whatever you owed in 2020. So people who may not have been eligible in 2018 or 2019 can get that in 2020 as well. And sometimes you have older people who have really good pensions and stuff, and they weren't eligible for 2018 and 2019. Well, one of the things for this year, there's a lot of changes with retirement accounts. And one of that is the required minimum distribution, which normally, if you're over, was 70 and a half, but at that age has been raised to 72. If you're over a certain age, you're required to take something out of your, any retirement account, and it's taxable income. And for some people, that's sizable. Well, for 2020, you do not have to take that money out. So someone who wants to lower their income can do that, and then maybe be eligible for a stimulus in 2020 if they don't need the money, from the retirement accounts. And I had somebody, and it was the person I actually had in Rhode Island, who had sold properties, had two rental properties she sold in 2018 and 2019. So because of the gains, she was not eligible for a stimulus through either one of those years. But in 2020, she's not selling property. Her retirement income would go just over the limit, but she doesn't have to take it. So she could take less of it, be under the limit, and get the $1,200 when she files her 2020 return next year. So there are a lot of, I wouldn't call them tricks, but a lot of little things to do to kind of get around things, and you try and maximize, what people can get. And, that's what I try and do. And it's, they're problems I never thought I would have to deal with, and it's just been amazing.
Well, let me throw another curveball at you now that you brought that up, because a lot of people do what they can to maximize what you get. Have you ever run across people that would try to get more stimulus money because of pets and animals?
No comment. No.
Come on, this is a society.
Here's a little something. I'm going to throw my mother-in-law, may she rest in peace, under the bus.
Okay.
So she like my wife is a pet lover.
Okay.
And when I was doing her tax returns years ago, and I think the first year I was doing it, she gives me all these little receipts, and then she writes a list of all her doctors, for medical expenses. So I noticed a name there that looked familiar, and it was a vet. And the only reason I knew is because we use the same vet for our animal.
Okay.
And she even had asked at one point, can she take, one of the pets as an exemption?
Right.
And unfortunately, you can't. The one thing you can do for a business, actually, there was a case of a junkyard owner who actually deducted like pet food costs for his dog because the dog served as a form of security.
Right.
To make sure people didn't, do any damage to the property.
Interesting. Okay.
But generally, you cannot take animals as, deductions, their expenses, their vet expenses, you cannot take. I know a lot of people, their fur babies are their lives, and, even more so than children in some cases.
Yeah.
But they, unfortunately, they haven't passed that law yet. I'll never say they ever will, because as I said, I'll never say I've seen everything, but, as of now, they're not.
Well, I got to tell you, as a pet owner, I'm not the only pet owner out there, so you might run across somebody that, if you think you could skirt Uncle Sam because you have a pet, good luck. And I actually have a pet that has a tail that's really, I think he has very little tail due to a tough situation when we adopt him. He's called damaged goods, but thankfully he's coming along pretty good. So now we talked about face masks. So you really got me thinking. Have you ever thought of trying to make a face mask for advertising where people go ahead and have your information and your card and all that on there as a way to get the name out?
My son actually made me a face mask that says Hack Tax and Accounting on it. He made it. I have T-shirts that say Hack Tax on it. And I had an old one that I wasn't wearing anymore. So he basically made it into a face mask. So I wear it when I meet clients now.
Yeah, but would you ever sell them to your clients or give them to your clients?
Well, I'm sorry, say that again?
Sure. Would you ever sell them or give them to your clients? I mean, there's no better time.
Well, you know what I have that I give to my clients? And I actually started doing this as a promotional product a year and a half, 2 years ago, hand sanitizers.
Really?
So
wow.
I have these little sprays that have my name, have my my number, my information on it, and I would give it to new clients, sometimes an existing client that I've known a while. Well, now, when I give it, they're like thrilled because these are little sprays you can keep in your pocket, in your purse, whatever you carry it around, and you just spritz your hand. I mean, I keep one on my desk at all times now. So it really turned out to be by accident an ingenious promotional product idea, and I was actually able to get a reorder last month. I wasn't sure, it was delayed a little bit, obviously, because those things are in demand, but I was able to get a pretty big order of them, so I'm good now.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the time, Stuart, really. I mean, to think that you would have a mask with your name and number and everything to promote I think it's a brilliant move. And again, this is a trending society. I don't care if you're on the internet, whatever, trending, face mask, name on there, contact, whatever. Can't hurt anything. I mean, if you're walking billboard over at Walmart wearing your mask, it's only free advertising anyhow. And
I know. Initially, when I saw people, doing that with face masks, I figured, it'll never, it's good for a couple of months, but this thing blows over. But now, I honestly think face masks are going to be a fairly big part of our society for the long term.
Yeah, no.
They're going to be people, you'll go into a Publix down here and you'll see people wear it and you won't think twice, you won't blink.
No doubt about it. So let me talk about the fact that you've had people come into your place, but do you find that you've had to do more Zoom calls to try to get some of your work done? Because that's another trend.
Yeah, a lot of business meetings that I've had, I've done through Zoom. I used to think, and I'm probably aging myself, Zoom to me, probably 4 or 5 months ago. It was a TV show that I used to watch when I was a kid. It originated in Massachusetts, and these kids, it was like you had Sesame Street. If you were a little older, you had Electric Company, and then if you were a little older, you had Zoom. And, they sang songs, and that's what I always thought Zoom was. And now, it's this. And, I found in the beginning, I was using it, a lot of the meetings and stuff were depressing. I actually attended a Zoom funeral for a friend of mine up north who had passed away from the virus. But I used it I wanted to use it for happier things too. So I actually in April threw a surprise birthday party on Zoom for my wife.
Right.
So where I got friends and family, and I started off in another room. My kids had the cake all set, and I brought my iPad in and everyone sang. And then I had some college buddies of mine. We hadn't really seen or all gotten together in the same room in 35 years. So we had a Zoom call set up, and it was nice. And for 2 hours, we just kind of reminisced, and it was a lot of fun. So I think, although there have been a lot of sad things that people, or a lot of depressing things they're using for, I think what you'll see going forward is that Zoom will be something that'll come out of this, and I think in some sense will be a positive thing. So you'll have, for example, if someone is getting married and an older relative is unable to travel to the wedding, maybe they could watch it over Zoom. Just certain events that maybe you can't attend, now you can. Distance wouldn't be an issue, and it's very easy to work with. For a basic account. So hopefully, whenever the new normal is, this will be a positive out of it. As opposed to, the reason for it and the reason it got so popular was because of the pandemic, which isn't a positive, but maybe it'll turn into one.
Yeah, so my question to you, and I think you probably touched on it, I just want to make sure I get it all in there again. Okay, do you find that Zoom meetings at times could replace your face-to-face meetings in terms of how you do business?
It depends. So you'll have, I think for older clients, it won't. I think the older clients, and it's a combination that maybe technology-wise they're not strong, but they're just used to that contact with somebody.
Right.
For committee meetings that I have as far as organizations, it could. It could replace it, and makes it easier. People don't have to travel as far as the distance, or what I've had already. We've had some hybrid meetings where some people are coming in person, but some people are not. So we have the meeting set up, and there's a computer or a laptop or something there, so everyone can participate. So it works out, because in the past I found, like, if somebody was unable to attend a meeting, but they in person and they had to be there, they maybe try and do it on the phone or Skype, and something was just always going wrong with that. But it appears with Zoom, things work pretty well, and that'll be a plus too for people who cannot make an in-person meeting, to have them there anyway.
Yeah, I've been using FaceTime to communicate with my mother. I'm sure if they have an iPhone, you could probably use that as well. The only thing I ever knew about Zoom before these meetings was that thing called a lead foot. You ever heard of that, lead foot?
That I never heard of.
Yeah, put your foot on the gas and take off. Okay, I'm not talking about the astronauts and all these other people out there, lead foot, but I'll tell you, I've got a good education on Zoom, and I'll tell you what, a lot of the networking meetings that I'm attending to now, they're actually using Zoom meetings to get more people there, and then they'll use them to set up happy hours and so forth later on. You're right. I think that's definitely something that's going to come out of it.
Sure. But here's the thing. Through the chamber, we've had a couple of Zoom happy hours, and it's a little different. I mean, maybe you'll get used to it. But what we were more successful as a chamber with, I think, we did some Facebook Live events, which were educational in nature. There were some things on social media that went really well, but what they seem to almost serve as a mixer too, because if you look at the comments, people are saying, "Hi, how you doing? Good stuff and everything." Oh, and someone would enter the room, everyone would say hello to them. It was almost like that served more as a mixer. The mixers that we had, they were fun. We would play games with people where you go around the room and everyone would have to give 3 facts about themselves, except one of them really wasn't a fact. So you do 2 facts and one was false, and everyone had to guess which one was made up. So you get a little creative with that as far as games, and there'll be a lot of creativity, I think, coming on with this, and we'll see how things go forward. I know the Chamber's always done a speed networking event once a year. If we do it this year, it's going to have a way different look than the past because it's not going to be in person.
Right.
Likely, and so how do you do something like a speed networking through Zoom? Now, I think there's a way you could kind of break off into small rooms, but sometimes it gets confusing, and even the in-person speed networkings became chaotic sometimes.
Well, the guy I work with, Warren Drucker, who works out of Keller Williams, he has a weekly meeting on Tuesday that goes from like 7:30 to 9, and his idea is now he's going to keep the Zoom meetings permanently in the morning, and then we'll eventually, when the restaurants open up and we're all comfortable, then we're going to go out to restaurants afterwards. I think that's what. So I have a feeling that that's what he's going to. And actually, you know what? Since I'm working late in the studio anyways, I hope I can attend his events although, more than 4 or 5 days a week, depending on what my schedule.
So what he's going to do is he's going to start the meeting on Zoom, and everyone would do their commercial, and then everyone would meet in a restaurant after?
No. What he'll actually do is do the Zoom meetings. They've already replaced the face-to-face. And then, by the way, he'll say, by the way, we're all going to get together at so-and-so restaurant on another night.
Oh, I see.
And then and then, of course, he's using those Zoom meetings to go ahead and use them, and then you get the phone number of the person you're interested in talking to or whatever. He has a list. And then we do the one-on-ones, which I think is shrewd. I really do. So, I mean, this guy's a sharp person. In that particular group, we got close to 40 to 50 people in that group. It's the most impressive group I've ever seen in my lifetime. So let's go back.
Has the group, now let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Has the group grown since this all started, or has it stayed the same?
No, as a matter of fact, Stuart, it has grown. It's gotten bigger. That's why he's being sold on this a lot more. I've been around a lot of networking groups, Stuart. I'll even get to the guy's name if you're ever interested in talking to him. But this guy runs a sound machine if I've ever seen one before. This Warren Drucker gets it figured out. This guy does. So I'll tell you about that. I think it's pretty interesting stuff. So let's go back to something that we may have touched on before. And you say every day you're seeing something different. Can you list me a lot more examples of what that is all about?
So when it first started, and early, but in businesses that all of a sudden couldn't be businesses anymore,
right?
And they needed a lot of help. So I wasn't getting questions as how can I minimize my tax liability. It was, how can I get some working cash? How can I get money? I need help filling out these loan applications. And my first reaction was, well, that's not really something I do. But, I learned quickly that I have to learn how to do that and have to be somewhat knowledgeable, whether it's through webinars or what have you. So, for many people, there was through the SBA, you had different sort of loans that you can take, and certain grants. So the first one was the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the EIDL. And, in the beginning, the website was constantly going down. It was hard to get through to fill out the application. People that were able, got funds. People I know anywhere from 50,000, 100,000. These are mostly small businesses that just needed some sort of working capital to get through. The SBA also had an instant loan. They advertised it initially as $10,000 that you don't have to pay back. And let me just backtrack.
Sure.
That first loan, the 50 to 100,000, you have to pay it back over 30 years. You don't have to make your first payment for 12 months. The rate is 3.75%. If you're a nonprofit, it's 2.75% on the big loan. The instant loan, which was up to $10,000, the reality was it was $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. So if you had 2 employees, you can get $2,000. That was a grant. You don't have to pay that back. So that was nice instant money, and you didn't really have to do a heck of a lot for that. The application for the bigger one was a little bit more in depth and a little bit more, complicated. Then in addition, all this payroll protection loan that we have, that a lot of companies did that, and there was a first round of applications, and then the funding ran out, and they have a second round, which we're still in now, and there's still some funding for that, where on average they'll take about 2.5 months of your average payroll, and they'll determine what they give you. Now, the loan can be forgiven if you use the money a certain way, and a certain way for things like payroll, rent, utilities. If you're paying a mortgage, the mortgage interest on that. So if you got $20,000, if you're a small company in a payroll protection loan over 2 months, initially it was over an 8-week period, you had to pay it back. Now they've since extended that to 24 weeks, so it should make it pretty easy for anybody to pay it back. If you pay it back and you fill out the loan forgiveness application, which will be really popular next month, then the loan is forgiven. Now, if for some reason you don't spend all the money in the time that they've given you, and they are giving you a lot of time now, you do have about a 2-year loan at a rate of 1%.
Okay.
Which, now the banks, this is a nightmare for the banks, because if they have to start collecting on a 1% loan, if you don't, so the banks want you to have the whole thing forgiven. And there is talk, it is on the table, that what they want to do is any PPP loan that's under $150,000 to just forgive it completely, no questions asked. You don't have to fill out anything, you don't have to check. If it's under $150,000, you don't have to pay it back. But that hasn't been passed yet. So as of now, everyone, no matter what the amount is, you have to file an application to get the money forgiven. The other thing that's also on the table, so right now, let's just say you get that $20,000, you use it on payroll and rent. Normally, those are tax-deductible expenses. But if you think about it, because the $20,000 would not be recognized as income, what you pay out wouldn't be recognized as an expense. So the money that you're paying for payroll, etc., would not be tax-deductible. Now, there is something on the table to make it tax-deductible, which would be really like a huge gift for struggling businesses, because they're not picking up the money coming in, but they could still take the deduction for the money going out. So there'll be a lot of things that you're going to see, Scott, in the next couple of months that will change. And things are changing with this almost daily. I've probably attended 4 or 5 webinars, and you have to keep going because there are always updates in this, and you have to just keep up. And that makes it crazy too, because I think what'll happen next month is going to be challenging. In addition to the July 15th date, a lot of the people are going to be filing their forgiveness on their PPP loans, but then the people that are doing second quarter payroll, they can also get a credit on payroll if they didn't take a PPP loan, up to 50% of employee wages. So it is, there are a lot of things. It's almost like you do a big flow chart. Like, if you did this, you go here. If you did this, you go here. So there are a lot of things that are on the table for these businesses. And, the government is trying to do it so that, businesses can stay in business, and trying to make it, giving them that extra working capital. I mean, restaurants are getting really hurt by this. Right now they can't fill the capacity. They're losing money left and right. So and there are going to be businesses that don't make it, and the hope is, most do, but, some probably won't.
All right, so let me ask you this. I know everything you're talking about right now, Stu, refers to loans and grants to businesses. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, everything, whether it's something they have to pay back or something that they don't. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So now, with that being said, do you find that a lot of credit scores are going to take a hit? Obviously, during the pandemic, they probably will, or there'll be a little bit of leniency, knowing full well that a lot of times, you have to sign personally for certain loans or grants. Can you go into more details about that? Because we know the credit scores are certainly going to definitely drop considerably.
I mean, I think they will. It's hard to say because this is unprecedented. I had a client tell me that before they got, I think it was one of the SBA grants, like a day before they got approved, they got a notification that the SBA checked their credit. So it's definitely out there. But I couldn't really quantify, it's something that no one probably will know for months as to how much. I mean, I think people's credit will take a hit, but the question is how much. I couldn't tell you. It's hard to quantify.
So then let's go ahead and just to get an idea. What types of loans and grants are available to businesses? Why don't we just break down some of the major ones?
So we have from the SBA, the economic disaster loan. So that, you put in, what your gross income is. So that's dependent on that. I would say it's roughly like if you had, say, gross income of, say, $120,000 in the last year, you might be eligible for a $60,000 loan. So that's one thing. Then there was the instant loan, which was up to $10,000 or $1,000 per employee, whichever is less. And then you have the PPP loan, which we discussed, which was based on payroll. So that's for the businesses. Sole proprietors are eligible for these as well. Initially they weren't, but they are eligible for these loans as well. And they'll look at, like, say, someone who files a Schedule C with their 1040, they'll look at the net income for that to determine, what kind of PPP loan that they would get. And I know Palm Beach County had a grant as well that was up to $25,000, but if you were getting the PPP, they would subtract that. So if you had a $20,000 PPP loan, you would be eligible for an additional $5,000 from Palm Beach County. So those are basically what's available. And again, we talked with the individuals getting the stimulus. There might be a second round, and who knows, even with some of the businesses, if maybe they're eligible, for an additional PPP if they already had one. Right now you can't do that, but, that could change.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. It's funny when you talk about, whether you can do some of these meetings face-to-face or you need to have the personal touch. Considering I'm not a very well technologically sound individual, I've gone to my wife's bank, and I still have to deal with the tellers. But so I've had a hard time adapting to that tellerless machine that they've got. It is where I'm forced to press a bunch of buttons, And
so can you go into your bank?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I was before they shut everything down.
No, but now can you go into your bank?
No, I can't right now. No,
because my bank, I can only do the drive-through.
Well, yeah,
if I had to do something inside the bank, I'd have to make an appointment.
Yeah, well, that's what happens with my wife's bank. But once upon a time, my wife's old manager tried to show me how to use this thing and said, you know what, I wasn't helping her out any by telling her I would do it, because that's what they're trying to do, is get everybody to be independent. And when you're dealing with an old school guy like me, that's easier said than done. But I think the branch got a lot of laughs out of my lack of technological support. But they have this machine where you just deposit everything that way. So I have somebody supervise me. You know what? Me trying to adapt to that technology is like me trying to tie a tie. Good luck, Charlie. That's a very tough, difficult situation for me, which is why I truly go ahead and wear golf shirts at all possible. So, just to show you, I can appreciate how a lot of the folks like the personal touch to let everybody to do it, and in my case, using the tellers versus old machines. But again, yeah, you're right, the peace of mind dealing with you face-to-face. But yet, meanwhile, we all know that there are changes whether we like it or not. So, so let's talk about things in South Florida. I know you and I have probably noticed a number of cases here increasing to 5,511. That was the last report. Stuart, in your estimation, why do you think the cases in South Florida or Florida are increasing? I mean, the only thing I can tell you is I think people are taking this thing for granted, and they're outright negligent. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I think initially, when they shut things down, I think people were pretty good. I think people stayed home. When they did have to go out, whether it was food shopping or what have you, they social distanced, they wore a face mask, they did everything they were supposed to. So as a result, the cases in Florida weren't bad. They weren't that high. Then it was time to try and open things up. And when they went to phase one, even though things as the definition of phase one was still very limited, I think people started thinking, well, this is my chance to get out. People, were just going stir crazy. They'd go out, they'd stand, obviously the social distancing went down the tubes, wearing face masks went down the tube, and now people are in closer proximity. I think there was a picture from Rocco's Tacos in downtown West Palm where everyone was just basically on top of each other, no face mask, no protection whatsoever. And now as a result, you're seeing the spike in cases, I think, just because people are not being as careful. And I don't see, you can't close the businesses down now. Again, even if they spike, you just have to try and do things to try and limit it. And they just passed something down where, most counties, I think in Florida now, you are required to wear face masks in a public place. Maybe that's a start. And maybe, people start doing that. They start being careful. But, you have a lot of people, you think about a lot of them, young kids. You think about our 22-year-old selves. What would we have done? We're older now. We're a little bit more careful, a little bit more cautious. But you think about it, when we were, in our 20s, we probably wouldn't be doing things a whole lot differently than like what the kids are now. And I think it's just the nature of just the age and I think that, that's something too. Hopefully people will get the message that in order for the cases to go down, we're going to have to still continue to socially distance, still continue to be, vigilant and just being careful and just be cautious and just do the proper things to protect ourselves.
Well, all I can tell you, for those individuals that are in jail or in prison, just imagine what all of us feel like. We're all under house arrest because of a pandemic. Scary thought, with all that time that we're forced to stay inside, and that applies to all of us. So, I know there were 16 kids that went into a bar and 16 caught COVID. So now 16 for 16, you're batting 1,000 for all the wrong reasons, for sure. And I think if people are taking this thing simply for granted, so I can appreciate everything you're saying about that. So
I know two people who have like children who were in their early 20s in the Orlando area. Mm-hmm. And in both cases, they were really good for the 2-3 months where they stayed in, they didn't go out, they quarantined. And then when things started to open up, they went out and they came down positive. And for a younger person, it probably doesn't have an effect, but where it becomes troublesome is if they give it to somebody that's older or who has issues with their immune system. That's where it becomes troublesome, and that's where it becomes dangerous for some people.
Well, I can appreciate that. My mother's up in the Metro Detroit area. She has COPD. My wife and I were supposed to go up there on Memorial Day, but the governor shut down the state where nobody could go. And my mother is 78 years of age, and she right now is really her days are numbered, unfortunately. Thankfully, I have FaceTime, but that prevented us from going up there to see her. And now, if you think it was bad before, now it's worse because Florida's a hot spot, and that's going to make it virtually impossible. Yeah, I appreciate that. I've come to the reality that that's how it is, and nothing I can do about it. So, but, these are the unprecedented times that we live in. So now, since we're talking about Texas in a pandemic world, why don't you talk about the pandemic in general? This is an open-ended thing. Go as deep into this as you want in terms of what we've had to deal with.
As far as taxes, and obviously we've seen.
Yeah, the floor's open. Pandemic in general, taxes, whatever you want. We're on a show. Remember, no limits. So now, no limits. I know. Talks about
no limits. It's new for all of us. Whether we're 20 years old or 60 years old, it's just new situations every day, new experiences, just coming across new things, and hopefully, and again, I think we're resilient as people, as a country, as a world, and I think we'll come back from this. They always say the comeback is stronger than the setback, right? So I have to believe that we will. And, there'll be things like even in the sporting world, you're seeing changes there now. They're starting to start up leagues again to try and get some sort of normalcy there, although I don't know how normal it'll be, especially if there are no fans in the stands. But it's just crazy, and it's sad. Like I think back before this started, and just like the beginning of this year, we have an amphitheater where we live in Wellington, and then they get like cover bands like every weekend. And my wife and I had never really taken advantage of it, and then this year we decided, we went to like 3 or 4 in January and February, and we were excited. We were ready to go to more, and obviously now that's actually shut down for the remainder of this calendar year, and they're hoping to resume it in 2021. And certain things are just sad, and I pass by the amphitheater every day when I go to work, and you feel kind of bad. Everyone's life was just thrown upside down, and you have that, and then all the social unrest that we've had, and the riots and the protests, and hopefully there'll be some good that comes out of it, some change for the better that'll come out of that, and just make us closer as a nation. And then on top of that, of course, we have an election at the end of the year,
right? Yeah,
and who knows how that's going to turn out,
right?
It seems like every month, you see all these jokes on social media, like what's going to happen next month. You have the murder hornets, or whatever they are,
right?
What's going to come next. This has just been such a crazy year, and no one knows what normal is going to be.
Did you ever see the day, though, Stuart? I know you're a sports guy like I am, that you would ever see remote announcers covering games, because that's what you're going to be looking at with MLB. I think a lot of the announcers are not going to go ahead and travel on road for road games.
Think about this, Scott. Anyone that's been an announcer or has had a dream to be an announcer,
right? When
they were a child, in effect, weren't they doing that, watching the TV?
Well,
and announcing the game.
Count me as one of those, then, Stuart, because I definitely did it. My Aunt Tina is the one who actually thought you were pretty good. I ought to pursue it, and I thank my Aunt Tina to this day for piping that dream into my head. And now I've been in the industry for 40 years. Yeah, count me as one of those, Stuart. No doubt about it, my friend.
But I think any announcer, I think they've done it before. So I don't think it's going to be that much of an adjustment for them to be broadcasting it remotely.
Well, NASCAR was working Kent Squire and Jeff Gordon. I think you're going to see a lot of the baseball games have it. In fact, there's been a lot of talk about it. So if you want to put the pandemic in general, both the fact that everybody's going to take a hit in the checkbook and all the crazy things that you're seeing in the sports world, I know when you come on our broadcast tomorrow when we do 108 Stitches baseball talk, we'll get into more detail. But you're right. I mean, you talk about a society which is upside down, not only financially but socially. To me, this is beyond my comprehension.
Yeah, who knows what sports will look like a year from now? And even with all these leagues resuming, it doesn't seem like they have a definitive plan when people start testing positive. Now, you're seeing a lot of athletes testing positive now, but nothing has started up yet. So they can kind of get around it, especially in baseball, where I guess they're supposed to report to camp July 1st. So there are players now that I guess have just tested positive, so they got to be quarantined for 2 weeks, so it shouldn't affect them. But, during the season, what happens if like a whole team gets infected or the majority of the team gets infected?
Well, not only baseball, what about football? You have a wide receiver room, 4 receivers down. I think what's ultimately going to actually end up happening anyhow is what happens if, God forbids, somebody major dies over COVID-19. We saw what happened with Rudy Gobert when the NBA went ahead and shut down after that. Then what happens?
And what was bizarre about that? If you recall, I don't know if it was about a week or 5 days before, he kind of made a joke about it at a press conference. He started touching microphones.
Right, I remember that, yeah.
And this is before he turned up positive. And to me, that was just so bizarre. And then, supposedly in the locker room, he was touching a lot of his teammates, kind of making a joke about it in general. And then I think Donovan Mitchell also tested positive, probably got it from, him. So that was bizarre. It was interesting when this first started to go south, there was always the optimism it won't be that bad, it won't affect us. And then 3 things happened, I think, overnight. And that's when things started to go south. So the 3 things were the NBA shutting down, the the gentleman who was on the flight from New York to Florida that knew he was positive but flew anyway,
right,
and Tom Hanks.
Wow.
So you have those three things that happened all in the same night, and now you start thinking, well, this is real. This is really, because beforehand, I don't think anyone could have predicted it was going to be like this. You heard the warnings and everything, but since this hadn't happened to anyone alive now, and I wasn't around for the Spanish flu in 1919, but
join the club.
But although my kids think I'm that old, I just never thought. I had gone to a networking event at the end of February, and the person whose venue we were using was fist bumping us.
Right.
And, and he was saying, I don't want to catch anything and all that. And, everyone was just kind of joking around, but there was a lot of handshaking and everything. And it just got very real, very fast. And I don't know. I don't know. I can't, that's probably a whole nother show is this could have been avoided.
Well, we probably could, but at least we're touching on general. Actually, what happened with me is I was in the Phoenix area with my wife, my father-in-law, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, and their young child actually flew out there. We were able to take in 3 spring training games, and we weren't able to take the 4th one, but we were able to get into the remodeled Milwaukee Brewer Stadium. So we were fortunate to get out there a week prior, but, we're flying on a plane. Luckily, we took a red-eye flight, so I always like red-eye flights anyway, Stuart. So if there's ever that time to have one, that was definitely it, for sure. So you're right. I mean, it's just so crazy. And then, of course, now everything, like you said, is turned upside down. I had a doctor's appointment on, I think it was Monday, and, I went to Baptist Hospital where I had my doctor, and going through all that pre-screening to me was just as bad as going through an airport. Wow, holy moly. I mean, that was just unbelievable. And you're right. It's just unbelievable stuff. So before we conclude the broadcast, why don't you let everybody know anything about Stuart Hack, a person, family guy, and your passion?
Okay, so I'm originally from New York, in case anyone hasn't figured it out by the heavy accent. I try telling people I'm from Texas, but they don't really buy that. I've been married. It will be this Saturday, 28 years to my wife, Diane.
Congratulations.
Thank you. She's put up with my jokes for 28 years, actually closer to 30 years. I have 2 children. Well, not really children anymore. I have a daughter, Leah, who's 22. A son, Corey, who turned 20 last month. Everyone is home now. Corey was going into, I guess he's tentatively going, actually your alma mater is going to be a junior at USF.
Really? Okay, cool. Great school.
So, and my daughter is an FSU graduate, so she graduated last year. Obviously my interest is sports.
Right.
When I'm not doing tax work, I am, I had alluded to me being active in the Chamber of Commerce here in Wellington. I'm actually currently the immediate past president, along with the current treasurer. So I'm serving multiple roles. That keeps me busy most of the time. I'll exercise. What I found I'm doing now, we have a gym where I live, but they've closed, so I couldn't go for a while. It's since opened. So I get up early. So usually what I do really early in the morning is I kind of walk around a circle that I live on for like an hour. And I get like about 3.5, 4 miles doing that. And I find I get actually a better workout than when I was going to the gym. Those are some of the things that I do when I'm not working. And, that's pretty much it. I used to like seeing movies, other than what we have like through Netflix and Amazon. No one's been out to a movie in a long time, so I miss doing that.
You go out to many restaurants at all, or you stayed away for the most part? We did a lot of takeout. Since they reopened it, we've been to 2. Right.
We went to one on Father's Day, and we went to one a few weeks before. We may go to one on our anniversary on Saturday. It's not something both restaurants we went to took the proper precautions. People were covered. We were separated. I didn't feel uncomfortable. But it's going to be something that just gets used to. You don't realize it, and then when you're out there, you start. You get a little nervous. I'm not going to lie. I didn't think I would, but I did. Once you see other people, and again, I told you the story before. Those two people were looking for an accountant, and he reached out to shake my hand, and I just recoiled.
Right,
and
I hear you.
Normally, I wouldn't think twice. I would just shake their hand.
Yeah, what I've actually done with my wife, she deserves a gold medal for putting up with me for 7.5 years. To be honest with you, my family views her as a god, and she's definitely a god in my family for sure. But with all due respect, I've only gone out to a couple of restaurants. We did do the Ruby Tuesdays thing when they were giving me $5 hamburger and French fries until that special went away, and so did we. But it was called Grand Larceny, steal the food, good food over Ruby Tuesdays, and they were more than happy to let me steal it for them, so I didn't need a lawyer for that move. But
there you go.
But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, nowadays you have to do things a whole lot differently, and what else can I say? And I got to tell you, folks, I had an opportunity to meet Stuart Hack through a common friend, Peter Ween. I had the Sports Exchange, and Stuart had his own show, and I appeared on your show one time at the beginning, and I'm just so glad that you and I have remained friends and then some, and now I'm glad we're working together here on this platform as well. Just so you know, folks, you're listening to No Limits on the WSAN network. My name is Scott Morganroth, and my special guest tonight is Stuart Hack. We are talking taxes in a pandemic world. So I hope you have an opportunity to listen to this broadcast, download it, because everything that Stuart told you, you're not going to get it right. Make sure you have a good notepad with you. So anything you want to add before we go ahead and go over some final things?
Sure. If anyone wants to reach me, my phone number is 561-214-6171. And then once again, my office is located in Wellington, but as we've discussed, I could do Zoom, phone, whatever.
And as for us, as we wind down the broadcast, you have a Twitter account you want people to go ahead and put out there?
Sure, it's HackTax1.
Very good. All right. And to get a hold of us, you can follow us at Twitter at Tribune South. That's the at Tribune South. Facebook, South Florida Tribune Gets It Done. Instagram, South Florida Tribune Gets It Done. A YouTube channel, the South Florida Tribune, and Stuart will have to do one of those YouTube video together when the opportunity comes there. Hopefully you'll subscribe to that channel as well. The website you can go to is www.southfloridatribune.com. You can find a lot of the most latest content, news, and weather, both from our media distribution partners as well as our columnists. You can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. LinkedIn, you can contact me on Scott Morganroth as well, and you once again go to our southfloridatribune.com to find the broadcast or wherever you get your podcast. So there's many ways to find this broadcast, and I hope you have an opportunity to enjoy it, because this one is a keeper. When we're talking about taxes, this is definitely a subject that applies to all of us, except for those that don't want to pay them and ultimately find themselves in isolation longer than they want to think. If you want to read between the lines, do it. If you don't want to read between the lines, don't do it. But meanwhile, Stuart, it's been we've had a wonderful time tonight on the broadcast. And you know what? I'm looking forward to bringing you on some of other sports shows as well, so you can talk about your passion. But this is
I'd like that. Thank you.
Well, you're going to get that opportunity. But you know what, folks? Let me tell you, and I can't emphasize it enough. During a very unsettling time, it's vitally important that you get the best tax information as you can. And I know Stuart Hack is really, really good at what he does. So on behalf of Stuart Hack, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, wishing you a great night, and we look forward to another edition of No Limits next Wednesday night. Good night, everybody.